You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. And now, it's time for the show that breaks down the options market from unusual activity alerts to market analysis, strategy overviews, listener questions, and much more. If it involves puts and calls, then our all-star panel will break it down. It's time to hit the Option Block with your host, Mark Longo from the Options Insider Media Group and co-hosts Uncle Mike TOSAW from St. Charles Wealth Management, Mark the Greasy Meatball Sebastian from OptionPit.com, Andrew the Rock Lobster, Joe Benazzi from OptionPit.com, and Henry the Flowmaster Schwartz from SEBO. The Option Block is brought to you by SEBO. When it comes to trading volatility, trust SEBO, the creator of the VIX Index, for in-depth and relevant information. SEBO's tools and services gives you up-to-date trade insights, analysis, and positions of VIX options and futures. No matter what kind of trader you are, there's plenty of useful information to take the guesswork out of creating your portfolio strategy and to help you make more educated moves in the market. Visit www.cboe.com/VIX today to learn more. And now, get ready to hit the Option Block.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back once again. It's October. Crazy. Spooky season already. Man, this year seems like it is just flying by. Are you in the same boat, listeners, or is this year just dragging? I guess to each their own out there. My name, of course, Mark Longo from the THE, OptionsInsider.com, as well as from the ever-exciting, ever-compelling network upon which so many of you are binging these days. Remember, if you like what you hear, some stars, a rating, a comment, whatever your platform lets you do, all of it collectively helps new people continue to discover the network out there. So if you do like what you hear, it does help people discover the content out there. And then, of course, you want to go above and beyond. The THE, OptionsInsider.com/pro. It's October 2nd now, listeners. So stay tuned. Might be giving away some fun stuff on the show in a little bit. And, of course, I am joined by the unclest of Mikes, Mr. Uncle Mike TOSAW from St. Charles Wealth Management, as well as by the greasiest of meatballs, Mr. Mark Sebastian from OptionPit.com. I introduce them now, listeners, because it is Monday. It is our kickoff show for the week. That means it's time for a little bit of the old 80s wrestling trivia. Here we go. All right, everybody. Welcome to our 80s wrestling trivia. I love when I run into listeners of the show, and the first thing they bring up is the wrestling trivia segment. It definitely resonates with the core group. Once in a while, we get an email like, why do you talk about wrestling? For those people, if you are the one person out there that doesn't like, hey, just hit fast forward a little bit. We won't hold it against you. Trading block coming up immediately after this. But before we get there, listeners, let's get into a little bit of the old 80s wrestling trivia. And, you know, today's wrestler, I got to admit, as a kid in the 80s, this wrestler never really resonated with me because he wasn't really the flashiest. And, you know, it was an era, it was a time of big, over-the-top personalities, big, explosive, literally, in the case of the Ultimate Warrior entrances, things that could easily captivate the attention of a young child like myself. This wrestler, I'm sure if I went back and watched his stuff now as an adult, I'd probably find, oh, this guy was actually a good technical wrestler, and he was very highly skilled and all the other stuff. But for when you're watching it as a kid and you want the bombast, you want the over-the-top characters, the larger-than-life personalities, This person never fit that bill. He was definitely a solid mid-carder, a popular guy. He popped up in a lot of the different shows and other things going on out there. He won the IC belt. That was kind of his main claim to fame. Well, we already got a buzz. All right. Main claim to fame. He won the IC belt. Never won the big dog. Never won the big kahuna. Even though for me, I think for a lot of wrestling quote-unquote purists, the IC belt is kind of the one. But hey, he won the IC belt, and he went on to have a rivalry, probably one of the bigger rivalries, they say, in the history of the IC belt, with another guy who wasn't, well, a non-flashy mid-carder, so I guess I can see why they put him together. Greg the Hammer Valentine. He fought this guy a lot for the IC belt. He also, this person would go on to be the first ever winner of a match at WrestleMania, so clearly he was the opening match at WrestleMania 1. He became King of the Ring in '89, but that was kind of it for the apex of his quote-unquote titles in WWE. They did put him in the Hall of Fame in 2000. I'm not sure if he's still alive. I think he is. He might be. He seemed like a pretty healthy guy, but you never know with his 80s wrestlers. Not exactly a key to longevity. All right, we already have a buzz from the greasiest of Meatball. Mr. Meatball, sir, who is this, I guess, popular but not exactly flashy mid-carder who won the IC belt, and that was it, sir?
You know, at first I actually thought it was Greg the Hammer Valentine.
Oh, yeah, that does describe him too. You're right.
But when you brought up the King of the Ring, it got me thinking. I was like, who won King of the Ring in '89? Because my next one was go to Tito Santana, and it wasn't Tito either. And so I'm like, well, who else is that? And you know,
I'm just gonna stop you right there, because you're losing badly, and it was Tito Santana. So I'll give it to you. I'll be nice. I'm going to be charitable. He did win King of the Ring in '89, at least according to this list I have here. Maybe this list is flawed, but he did win. So you were on the right track, and you need a little bit of a boost against Young. He's winning by like 10 points. No, because
Tito Santana did not win King of the Ring.
It says here, King of the Ring in 1989. That's what it says.
I don't think so.
Oh, we might have a dispute here. Again, I didn't have a chance to fact check this.
Let me look here. I'm looking King of the Ring.
Hacksaw was King of the Ring, obviously, too. But, yeah, interesting. So, yes, you do get the point. I will give you the point. I don't think Uncle Mike will fight.
All right. Yeah, no.
You know, he knows.
I mean, Tito Santana was the ultimate mid-carder. He was so good a wrestler. And he, that's what threw me off is the King of the Ring thing. Because I knew he was the first match of WrestleMania 1. I want to say he fought. It wasn't the Hammer. Who did he fight in the first match of WrestleMania 1?
I don't know. Maybe it was Greg.
Somebody lame. Maybe it
wasn't Greg the Hammer again. I mean, look,
I don't think it was.
Who won? I'm trying to see.
Now you got me all kinds of messed up.
The main event of King of the Ring was Tito Santana versus Rick Martel in 1989. So I'm guessing.
Now I knew that he had been partners with Rick Martel, and they'd had like a big feud after they broke up with partners.
Yeah, the final.
They were called Strike Force.
I actually have a blow-by-blow breakdown of the King of the Ring tournament in 1989. Who won round 2? And the final event was Rick Martel versus Tito Santana, and Tito Santana.
You know what? I stand corrected. So that was what threw me off. Everything else had me going that way. But you know what? I was thinking of a different King of the Ring, because they had like where there was like an actual like King of the Ring thing, and like who was the king? It was Randy the Macho Man, and they had like a kind of a separate King of the an actual King of the Ring thing in 1992 or 93 that I was thinking of. But, yeah, I'm going to say it was Tito Santana.
All right, and quickly here, I promised the folks at the top of the show, since you did win, Mr. Meatball, you get an added bonus this week, because it is our first show for the month of October. That means we have to give away our Pro Trading Crate for last month. So, listeners, hopefully you were active in the Pro sometime during the month of October. You got your name in the hat if you did join before the end of the month. So you, too, can have your name entered for fabulous prizes. All right, Mr. Meatball, I have fired up the random number generator. Tell me, sir, when the mood strikes you to stop, and I shall highlight.
I will. You know, I like to take my time.
Oh, you want to? I'll let it keep going during the show if you want. We could do that.
Yeah.
All right, let's go. Let's keep the people waiting.
Let's start with markets, and then we'll get
there.
digging.
We'll get there. All right, here we go, listeners. Meatball's going to keep you hanging on the winner. Meanwhile, though, no more hanging because it is time for the trading block.
It's time to break down the latest topics, trades, and trends in the world of options. It's time for the trading block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the trading block, the portion of the show where we break down what the heck is trading. And again, it just shows you how fickle these markets are and also how hard it is to prepare for some of these shows here on the network, because just in the time that it took to do that little wrestling segment, we've seen the markets change a little bit again. They were mixed heading into the start of the show. Two other major indices, the Dow and the S&P, were kind of flirting with red, but the NASDAQ was fighting to remain in the green. It has now given up the ghost. All major indices are now in the red. NASDAQ only ever so slightly. S&P, though, giving up the ghost, off about 0.2%, and the Dow off about 0.7%. So they are starting to feel a little bit more of the red. You know, some people thought maybe, and we did see some signs of optimism earlier this morning. We did get not quite a deal, but a punting of the ball in the whole shutdown debate out there. So buying a little bit more time. We thought the markets might like that a little bit, but at the end of the day, not so much. We had VIX when we kicked off the show at about an 1810, and that puts it up 0.7 of a point. And right now it's at about an 1830. So that's up about 9/10. So almost a full point back to the upside. So, of course, getting the weekend back and also maybe getting a little bit of forward looking to the next shutdown debate priced in there as well. VVIX at about a 95 when we kicked off the show, up about a full point. VXX 23.25, up about 1/4 of a point. UVXY 1640, up 0.4 of a point. SVIX 2765, down, of course, down about 2/3 of a point. UVIX 3.5, vacillating around, up about 1/10 of a point. But you know what? Listen, you know it's coming in just 9 days. Can we stay above? Let's stay here. Let's stay at 3.5 for the next 9 days. Man, a 35 in UVIX. Yeah, I could work with that. I was thinking we were going to be at a 180, 170 by that time, and we still might be. And then, of course, you're talking the high teens, and it's a very different beast. So if we can stay around here, maybe even a little bit frothier for UVIX. Can you imagine a UVIX with a 40 handle, listeners? The fun to be had for all of you. Your own private islands for each of you out there. And then Vol Q at a little bit north of a 20, about a 20.2. That puts it unched from our show on Thursday. All right, Mr. Meatball, you are our winner. Any enduring memories of one, TITO, the mid-carder, Santana, and then B, what's catching your eye in the market, sir?
Yeah, the flying forearm. It was the best, maybe the best closing move out there. That flying forearm, technically one of the more proficient wrestlers. I think he still even wrestles nowadays, and he's still pretty good. He was, as technically proficient as you're going to see in the business. He was a mid-carder. Probably could have been nowadays if he had come up years later. I think he would have been a major carder because the WWE made room for guys that were not 6'10" and 300 pounds. We saw some smaller guys that have become extremely successful. You look at the success of JJ Styles and CM Punk and some of these other guys, and you've got a recipe for a guy like Tito Santana to become highly successful. And so that's what I would say I remember about him. I remember his fight with the model Rick Martel, although at the time he was just Rick Martel. And then, they could never get him in a feud that felt like it had real like teeth to it, I'd say, is the one issue that he had, right? Like he never got into, he never had a feud with Rick Rude, which was the easiest way to move up in the card because that guy was such a good heel. Meanwhile, everything I've read about Rick Rude was that he was the nicest guy on the planet. He never had, a fight with Dino Bravo, who everything I read said was maybe even more evil than he was on stage. So he just had, I think, bad luck in terms of where he got matched up.
That Dino Bravo Dark Side of the Ring episode is an interesting watch. Many people get assassinated over smuggling cigarettes, but that's the kind of guy he was. A character. But yes, sir, in addition to all the fun that is Tito Santana, what's catching your eye in the markets today, sir?
Yeah, we've had a really wild range today. We've been up, we've been down. ISM came out, they liked it. Then they didn't like it. Really, what we're talking about is the bond market. And bonds at first really acted Sunday night into Friday like hey, they'd kind of liked the news. And then it has just been kind of a bond bloodbath. And that's pulled the S&P down. The S&P futures are down to about 4,300. That's been kind of the area they've been fighting in for the last hour plus. The NASDAQ is kind of still the lone bright spot. There seems to be some bullish action in the mega caps. You've got a bid on Apple, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and Tesla. Although Tesla just went red. So you've got those mega caps that are green. Outside of those, if there wasn't a bid there, this would be a much uglier day, because kind of across the board, you got XLK up, and then it's a sea of red. The biotechs are down 3.5%. Materials down 1.7%. Energy 2%. Financials 1.1%. Industrials 1.15%. Consumer staples down 1%. Utilities down 5%. Even drug stocks down almost 1%. Consumer discretionary on the back of Amazon is up a little bit, and retail down, or is barely down. XLY is down about 0.2, and XRT is down about 0.8. So kind of across the board, a sea of red minus just a few names. But even those aren't enough to lift the market and keep us higher, because everything looks a little reddish, a little bearish. I'm really kind of fascinated to see where the day ends. Every time vol gets a little bit of a bid, they try and fade it. But that bond market is not acting like it's happy. And, if the bond market's going to go to hell in a handbasket, the stock market's going down with it.
Getting a nice redux of 2022, perhaps, or everything headed down the drain here. You know who is the opposite of that mentality? He's our ray of sunshine, our dose of optimism. He is the uncleest of Mikes. He did not buzz in, so he did not get to comment on all things mid-card hero Tito Santana. So let's start there. Mr. Uncle Mike, your enduring memories of... This guy almost might be the definition of a mid-carder when you think about it. Mr. Tito Santana, your joys, your memories, your loves, your hopes, all the fun of Tito Santana. And then B, sir, what's catching your eye in unless you're talking vol, not really an Uncle Mike type of day?
Not exactly. And I would like to propose, and I think Mark Sebastian would even agree with this, once you buzz in, you should have to give your answer right there on the spot, because otherwise, if you continue to read the question, you're better off just buzzing in, letting you read the question, and then you get full rights to it.
That is true. I try to keep it going for the audience so they can have a chance to figure it out, because not everybody listening is, of course, the 80s wrestling masterminds that you folks are.
All right. Well, we'll have to figure something out then, because then next Monday I'm buzzing.
Here's what I would say is, you shouldn't give me 2 minutes to talk my way through an answer while I'm trying to figure it out.
I was trying to be charitable.
So maybe when Mark gets done at the end of the question, you have 5 seconds to answer.
I'm trying to be charitable, because otherwise
logic. Because I literally was like, okay, it's it's not the hammer. I thought it was Tito. And then
I literally had the same identical thought process as he was reading it too, just like you. Those are I went with the hammer, then Tito, and then I would have gone with Tito as a guess at the end, but I was thinking,
that King of the Ring thing really threw me off, because there was this big King of the Ring event in like 93 that was what I was 93, 94, 95 that was like an actual big huge tournament that they would push once they kind of started the Raw that I was thinking of in terms of how that thing worked. But Tito was definitely the right choice.
Yeah, then maybe not let us buzz in until you say, okay, buzzers are open now. And then the first one to hit the buzz.
No,
and then
I've been letting it go for a while, trying to wait to see if one of you guys would figure out that strategy, that it makes sense to buzz in right away. It totally makes sense to buzz in right away. I was going to let you guys work that out on your own. Now that you've worked it out and said it publicly, you may have to change it. But yes, I was going to let that be a little bit of a game to see if who would get there first.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's I'm a reasonable guy, especially in the ethical sport of professional wrestling. So I get it. Some of my enduring memories of Tito Santana. I remember it was kind of in his late AWA days and in his early WWF days. He had a feud with Jesse the Body Ventura, and Jesse the Body Ventura would always call him Chico Santana and make fun of him because his hometown in Mexico sold bad tacos. And so that was something where, and then
Mark,
Tito Santana would proceed to cuss him out in Spanish.
Mike, I heard a really good description of WWF or professional wrestling, because it is a sport, but somebody was describing it as predetermined sports. And I think that's maybe the best way to describe wrestling, because to call that not something that you need to be athletic at and call it a sport, I think is fair. It just happens to be predetermined at the end.
Yeah, you say the F word. You say.
See, I don't know what you're talking about with this predetermined stuff.
Predetermined athletics is the way I think the best way to describe professional wrestling.
Yeah, you say the F word around wrestlers. You say fake. They get pretty angry. They say it's predetermined.
It's because it's not fake.
Yeah,
it is not
fake. You can't
fake.
fake gravity. You're falling on your back, and that hurts. But
it is predetermined, not fake.
Well, I'm going to refer you to what Dr. D. David Schultz said about this in an interview with John Stossel. YouTube that. That's my opinion on if wrestling's real or not, or if wrestling is predetermined or not. Just see what he did to John Stossel. So that's my thing on it. So wrestling's real, folks. I've played in the NFL, and sometimes that's not real. That's predetermined. I mean, really, can Tom Brady really win all those Super Bowls? Do you believe that? But I mean, to say that Hulk Hogan's not real, or the things in the 80s that happened, I mean that was real. I mean, it's all real, folks. I mean, let's just be honest with ourselves on it. I mean, pro wrestling is real. I mean, are we going to say that Santa Claus is fake too?
Luckily, not a huge child audience for this show, sir. So I think we're safe there.
Okay. Good.
Questions we don't ask during summer break.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, sir.
So anyway, my enduring memories of Tito Santana are his feud with Jesse the Body when he first came to the WWF. I thought that was excellent, and Jesse the Body played a big part in that. He's kind of an unsung hero of the early days of wrestling. A lot of people know him more as an announcer later, and then of course a governor, and then a conspiracy theorist. But the early days of pro wrestling, Jesse the Body, he played a big part in it, and he also played a big part in getting Tito Santana, or as he called him, Chico Santana, promoted in a lot of ways. In terms of this market, yeah, we have just a couple stocks that are holding this up from making this a zombie apocalypse. And really, in terms of the only things that are lighting up my tape on my watch lists, or the things that I look at, are we got Apple, Amazon, Google. It's not one of my holding, or not it's a very minimal holding for clients, NVIDIA, and we got Microsoft. Aside from that, I got red across my screen here with everything. And I think with bonds going down like they are, at some stage, people will buy into bonds. The United States is not going to go belly up. If you're looking to invest your money, and you're looking for something that has yield, bonds just become more and more attractive the lower they get. And the benefit of bonds is that they kind of have a built-in covered call on them, meaning that as bonds don't move anywhere, you get a yield on them. And that yield is actually becoming somewhat respectable now, whereas it has not in years past. So that is something to consider. Even
Mike,
though
I was actually asking this question this morning. I'd love your opinion on this. Like, if the Fed is probably done raising rates, or not going to raise them much more, and the U.S. may or may not enter a recession, either way, let's agree that growth seems to be slowing a little bit. Bonds start to, how attractive do bonds start to look with the yield they've got on like the 5-year or the 10-year? 10-year at approaching 5%, do we think, yes, the stocks have gone parabolic, but are they going to return on average over 5% a year for the next, 4.5 years? If we're going to go have a rough stretch here, is that the big hurdle to stocks right now?
I don't know, but I got to ask the same question about a week ago, and do I think that bonds are a hurdle to stocks? Over the short term, possibly. Over the long term, no. Over the long term, stocks do outperform bonds even when we have these higher yield times. Because if you look back on the highest yields of our lifetime, back when we were all in kindergarten, I believe, when you could get CDs at 10% for a couple of years, and we had astronomically high interest rates because we were trying to beat inflation, and the President Ford's whip inflation now, which was kind of a cool slogan. Back in that day when we had enormously high interest rates, at that stage, it was one of the rare times that yields on bonds did outperform stocks. However, the concern of how come everybody didn't buy bonds back then was the fact that there was a lot of fear in that, well, we're going to have more inflation and bonds are even going to go lower. And like anything, oftentimes when you buy things, if it doesn't feel good, a lot of times it can end well, meaning that you hate buying a stock that's gotten clobbered. I mean, let's just look at Meta as an example. Who would have wanted to have bought Meta when it was a third the price it was right now about a year ago? And bonds are kind of in the same category in that right now it does not feel good to buy something that's just had the down arrows on it for so long like bonds have. And
the crazy thing is that's when you want to do it, right?
Yes.
When it's a bloodbath and everybody hates it, that is when you step in. That is where, Mike, and this is where a guy like you, I think, and I'm not going to sit here and blow smoke up your what, but you are a smart guy and a good advisor for this. This is what I love about working with you with like my kids, and I send my cousin and my friends, because you're willing to say, you know what, let's go into bonds using some options, because you use options and most people don't. And let's take a leg out on some TLT or some IEF and sell some puts or do something when there's true pain in a stock or an ETF. And that's one of the things where your use of options really puts you at a position to truly add value that a lot of advisors just simply don't. And again, I'm not meaning to blow smoke up your hindquarters, but that's one of the things I love about working with you and why I've got my kids working with you and why you're such a value add to this show.
Well, I appreciate the kind words.
You're welcome. They're deserved.
Well, thank you. And so now you're getting me all soft for next week in the wrestling trivia game now.
I'm trying to pitch you two at each other's throats with this wrestling thing, and here's the meatball with all this love fest going on here. Let's see if we could roll past the love really quickly, listeners, before things get too sappy. Are these markets looking sappy from a volume perspective? The answer is kind of depends where you look. If you look out in VIX land first, listeners, the answer is maybe. 303,000 contracts on the tape right now. That ain't a heck of a lot, all things considered, especially when you see some of the days we've had of late out there, multiple 1 million plus days out there in VIX land. Doesn't seem like we're going to hit that, but then again, VIX does like itself a good whipsaw, so if we keep whipsawing around a little bit today, we might see more numbers on the tape. Either way, that ADV looking robust again, 777,000 contracts. That's what VIX is putting up a day right now. Those are dog days of summer numbers, at least for this year. SPY, 5.2 million contracts. So SPY's not messing around. SPY's looking robust. The ADV, 8.2. So spoiler alert, SPY on trajectory to hit its ADV again today. The S, 1.8 million once again. I don't even need to pull up the most actives anymore. I can tell you right now, there's a good chance, 98%, that 20 of the top 20 most actives in SPX are going to be expiring today, and somewhere around 5 of the top 40 will not be expiring today. Everything else will be expiring today. So that's just kind of the beast that SPX is these days. 0 day has really transformed that product in some very fascinating ways. 1.8 million contracts on the tape right now. The ADV just a tick under 3 million, 2.99 million. Small caps, IWM, 700,000 contracts on the tape. We neglected to check in with our friends in small cap land because they are getting whooped today, listeners, off 1.6% today for IWM. So a rough day for small caps, hence that robust volume number. The ADV, 934,000. Yeah, they're going to hit that today. And the Qs, 2.6 million. The ADV, about 3.6 million. It's only a million away, which for the Qs is a bit of a rounding error these days anyway. Let's get out to the single names. And you know what, listeners? I talked about this dichotomy a lot on the show, this macro versus micro. We're another one of those today, listeners, because if you just look at the single name, most actives, you'd think we're back in the dog days of summer. It only cost you 167,000 contracts to break into the top 10. That is not a heck of a lot. We've easily seen 2x that on some busy days, and not quite today. That gets us to our friend RIVN. RIVN Automotive trading $24 even, up about 2 3/4 in the last week or so. Today, giving up about a quarter. RIVN making some interesting headlines. They're still hemorrhaging money per vehicle, apparently, but also expecting to deliver more. So I guess that's a win. You're delivering more of a thing that's costing you a lot of money to make. They're losing somewhere 30-odd grand, if not more, per vehicle that they're shipping. Not exactly a great business model. I don't know. It's one of these fun things, listeners. Either way, the stock's up and it's down. It's up and it's down. It was down to as low as about 23.5 today and up to nearly $25. So a decent range today. And again, good for $1.67. And the number 10 spot on our countdown today, listeners, number 9. This is a name we were just talking about on our crypto rundown last week, and that's usually, for a lot of you, it's your preferred vector for getting a little bit of the old crypto nibble in your securities account, particularly for an optionable one. This is Marathon Digital Holdings, trading $8.82, up about 30 cents or nearly 4% today. On the year, we've seen, obviously, this vacillate a lot with what goes on out in the crypto space. It was about $11 a year ago. It got down to its nadir of $3.11. That was in December of this year. So since then, it's had a nice pop. Hit its high for the year of about almost $20. That was back in July. And since then, right back down to $8 again. So a very topsy-turvy ride for Mara. I expressed my views on using this as your surrogate for crypto. Obviously, when you're using any company and not a tracking vehicle like a BITO or something like that, you're going to have issues in there. So it's not going to be a one-to-one vehicle. But for a lot of you, this is your preferred vector right now to the tune of 170,000 contracts on the number 9 spot. Number 8. For a lot of you, this is your preferred vector for AI because it's a hell of a lot cheaper than NVIDIA or a lot of the other names that are at the vanguard of the AI right now, the AI movement. This is Palantir. It's had a nice pop over the last week, though. It's got back up to $16 and a little bit shy of that right now, off about a dime or so today. But on the last week, it's up nearly about exactly $2, actually, because it was a tick shy of 14 when we were looking at it a week ago, and now it's about a tick shy of 16. So nice little recovery here for Palantir. They got a contract, I believe, with the Defense Department. Either way, good for number 8 and the 176,000 volume level today. Number 7, a little bit more expensive AI player. This is Microsoft. Of course, they have a lot of other irons in the fire. They have that massive Activision deal. Of course, their OS that drives the ship. All kinds of things. Lots of different moving parts at Microsoft, not just AI. $3.1825 today, up about $2.50 today, and again, good for 185,000. Again, we're at number 7, listeners. We're only at 185,000, so that's the kind of day we're having. Number 6, good old artist formerly known as Facebook. It's Meta, 208,000 contracts, 303.60, actually 303.82, just ticked up about 360 or about 1.2% today. So a nice little day here for Meta. So again, kind of showing how we're having this weird kind of mixed day. The bleeding end of the super magnificent 7, call you what you will. They're having a decent day. Everything else, maybe not so much. Meta, number 6, 208,000 contracts. Number 5, it's the chip zone coming right about where we expected. It's AMD. Almost said AMZ, listeners, looking at too many Z names. AMD, 223,000 contracts. 102.80 right now, off about a dime, a nickel, not much at all. It's had a range of 101.70 to the dark side and 103.70 to the upside, so pretty much exactly a $2 range. And right in the middle of it almost right now. So bouncing around, again, good for 223,000. Again, that shows you what kind of light day we're having, listeners, all the way up at number 5, and we can't even break 250,000 contracts. Speaking of Z's, let's get to number 4. The Amazonians here, 128.68, up about $1.58 or so, or 1.25% today. So again, the names you've heard of, the big tech names, faring okay today, even if they are coming off their highs. Amazon got up to about 130.5 today, so obviously below that, but the low was 126.5. So obviously right kind of in the smack dab in the middle of that range right now, which makes sense. The markets are kind of hovering, flirting with unch to red to green again. So intriguing stuff out there. Amazon number 4, 442,000. Now we're getting a little bit more respectable. Let's keep it in the A-related tech names, listeners. It is Apple, the fruit company, coming in at number 3 again today. So Apple continuing to get kicked down the curb. Only 453,000. Again, we're all the way at number 3. Not even 500,000 contracts. It's a lazy day out there, listeners. 453, that gets us to Apple, $173 and a quarter, up about $2 today. So nice little pop for Apple out there today. Can all this green, can all this luster, can this last throughout the day if we turn deeply red? I guess we shall find out. The high for Apple was 174.30, so they've already given up $1 from that, but also the low was a little bit shy of 171, so they have bounced nicely from there as well. So can we retrace those lows, or we're going to retest those highs today? I suppose we shall find out. Number 2, listeners, this is the real tip of the AI spear. This is NVIDIA, 726,000, until at least we get to the OpenAI IPO that everyone's waiting for. NVIDIA, 726,000 contracts on the tape, 446 3/4, up 11 3/4, or 2 3/4% today. So just a hard pop. It's like Goldman put out a very positive report on their quote-unquote conviction buy list. So I guess a buy rating is not enough anymore. This is a conviction buy because it hasn't risen enough. The PE of 108, they say pshaw to such things. Rally ho, NVIDIA. Hey, so far that's been the right side to be on. And then number 1, listeners, you know what it is. It's the old Tesla, 249.5, off about $0.75. They've had a range of 254 and a quarter and a low of 242 2/3. So did a lot of living. Almost a $12 range on the day. So, wow, that's a lot of action for Tesla. But again, it is Tesla. And again, good for 1.36 million contracts. So Tesla on any given day is going to put up about 1.3 million contracts. And that's where you find ourselves today. Quite a range from $1.67 at number 10 all the way up to 1.36 million on the upside, listeners. In terms of earnings, kind of at the dregs of the season, unless you get really excited about McCormick Spices. They're popping off on Tuesday. Everyone was all hot and bothered by the cannabis sector. Well, their Tilray is popping off on Wednesday, so maybe we'll get some more insight there. And then Thursday, you got Levi, so all your jeans vol, as well as Conagra. So some intriguing stuff. Unfortunately, Mr. Meatball, you did miss Darden's restaurants recently, so you can't participate on that fun. But what we do have for you and for the audience is a little bit of the old odd block. So let's get to that right now.
It's time to break down the most interesting, unusual, and downright questionable options activity that's been identified by theoptionsinsider.com. It's time for the Odd Block.
All right, everybody, let's get weird. Let's get wild. It's time for the Odd Block. And, you know, let's start off paying off a trade we just talked about on the show last week, listeners. This a lot of near-dated, in-your-face, dare I say it, almost zero DTE paper going up in a lot of these names out there right now. You guys want your 0 days, Teslas, and your Apples? Well, you got to settle for maybe some very near-dated swings for the fences in names like, let's say, Micron. Everything old is new again out here, listeners. Micron. The new hot name. Everyone's all hot and bothered by Micron again. It's like 1998 all over again. Micron, you know it, ticker symbol MU. Last week on the show, listener, we talked about someone coming in and taking a very short-term swing for the upside fences. It seemed not crazy given everything we've seen out there. It wasn't that outlandish, but an intriguing one nonetheless. Someone came in on the show last week, listeners, and scooped 2,175 of the Micron SEP 66s expiring last Friday, the 29th. They paid about 52 cents for these bad boys at a time when the stock was about $65.50. This was immediately after earnings. So, you know, Micron was kind of whipping all over the place after the earnings announcement. So they were betting on yet another updraft to be had in good old Micron. And it seems like that bet worked out. The stock closed on Friday, listeners, $68.03. So quick back of the napkin math, listeners. These calls went out at $2.03. They paid almost 53 cents for them. So they made a nice $1.50 on this trade, 2,175 times, aka about $326,000. We went and checked. Didn't seem like they closed these bad boys out. They were all pretty much still open through expiration, which is another weird trend we've been noticing of late. People putting stuff on and then just letting it ride regardless of how many dollars in the money they are. They don't close them out at all. So I guess they wanted to get themselves some Micron stock. So if that's the case, their wish was granted. Maybe they're thinking a little bit better of that now because the stock's off a little bit today. So maybe they don't want the stock as much as they did. But they're still up on this trade. Mr. Meatball, I'm sure in all your flow madness, you noticed this Micron Palooza last week. Everything old is new again. What are your thoughts on the tsunami of paper we saw in Micron last week? If you spotted any interesting nuggets, and then B, in particular, this little over 2,000 lot that seems to have worked out pretty well.
Yeah, Micron's been interesting. It had some, it's like a decent sized roll, I want to say, on Friday, and it's picked up again. The chips as a whole look like they are trying to get themselves off the mat. I mean, NVIDIA basically has been the only chip that's really been up this year, along with maybe Broadcom. So it's interesting watching all this paper go up. Micron's busy again today. There was the biggest trade I think I saw today so far was, or maybe it was Friday. They bought out of the money puts tied to stock for some size on Friday, and then today, you got some April call buys that look kind of interesting. So, Micron might be ready for a little rally.
We shall see, listeners, as we keep on rolling. Let's go out to another funky one, hence its inclusion in this segment, listeners. Let's go out to Infosys. I haven't talked about them in a long time. This is an Indian company, so Infosys here. Ticker symbol INFY, INFY, trading about $17.14, up about 3 cents today, so not exactly a banger day for them today. On the year, a year ago, they were trading $17.08, so it's been pretty much a lost year for Infosys here. They did rally it in December up to about $20.50, and that was kind of all she wrote for this one. They crushed it the rest of the year down to about 14.75 in April. That was the low for the year. Then since then, they've actually tried to rally it a bit. So if you look at it glass half full, since April, they did rally it all the way up to about $18 again, $18 even a couple of weeks ago. And then they've kind of given up some of that since. So back to about 17.14 where it is right now. So kind of a lost year, net on the year from April till now, though, looking pretty good. So it kind of depends how you want to parse this chart, listeners. What we saw today, a funky one, it was 2,276 of the Jan 17 calls going up. Looks like paper lifting the offer there for $1.10. It's about a 27 vol. The stock at the time was a little bit lower, 17.07, but not a huge move out there. And then looks like, let's see, they went up at exactly the same time too. So they were not marked spread, but they went up at exactly the same time and exactly the same size as well. So once again, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, listeners, 2,272 of the Jan 16 puts as well. Paid, looks like 55 cents for those. Looks like they lifted the offer on both. So it has the whiff of a strangle. I couldn't see if there's any tied component to it. Didn't go up tied. Sometimes with this execution, they can get a little funky with how they put these up. Listen, they could have maybe sold the puts. They were very tight markets. But it has the whiff. It has the air of a bit of a strangle out here in Infosys, which we don't see very often. And kind of makes it kind of fun. Also a very tight strangle, only $1 wide, listeners. So if that's the case, they paid $1.65 for the Jan 16-17 strangle. So they need this bad boy to start popping. And I don't know if a name that's net unched on the year is where you want to go for loading up on your strangle premium, but that's what they did. Mr. Meatball, do you concur with that? You think this was a strangle? You think maybe they're up to something else? And what are your thoughts on it, sir?
I believe it is a strangle. And it's things are moving around. Things are moving around a lot, and a lot of these look, a lot of the individual equity vol looks a little too cheap. So I don't hate the play.
Interesting. Meatball says load up on that primo in good old Infosys. We'll get you out of here on this one, listeners, because we got to get to the uncle list of mics. Let's go to NTRA Inc. This is another newcomer. This is a clinical genetic testing company that specializes in non-invasive cell-free DNA testing technology with a focus on women's health. My goodness, say that 5 times fast. All right, trading 43.20, off about $1.06 today, or off about 2.5%. So a rough day for them. On the year, they're kind of treading water, like our last name. They were trading $44 a year ago, so they've net moved less than $1 on the year, even though they did hit it to the low of $34 even back in November of last year, and then they rallied it to the high for the year of 63 even. So weird prints, even money prints on this name. That always makes me curious, to say the least. September 1st, $63 was the high. So interesting, $29 range on the year, and then they settle it out back right now, almost literally unched from where it started the year. So intriguing. And what do we got here? What did our Eye of Sauron find? It found some upside calls. So go figure. Someone likes upside calls in the biotech, listeners. Never seen that play before. This time it was the Jan 50. Someone scooping 2,000. Well, maybe scooping. Let's see. 2,050 of the Jan 50 calls. Looks like they traded for $3.30. Exactly mid-market. It is a 56 vol, which is nothing to sneeze at. But look at the range I just mentioned on this stock. The stock was $43.41, so a little bit higher when these went up. And there are earnings on November 17th, so could be a bit of the old overwrite as well. They got a decent amount of juice for these, Mr. Meatball. What are you feeling? You thinking overwrite? You thinking they bought these? I mean, it is a biotech. It passes
It's a biotech.
prologue.
They almost certainly bought them, I would imagine. You don't usually see a lot of overwriting in biotechs.
No, it would work out sometimes.
Except for in like Amgen, but even that, sometimes it's not.
Sometimes, at the end of the day, listeners, when it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, and if our past is prologue here, which it often is, then they probably did buy these. A meaty swing for the upside. You like these, listeners? Jan 50s for $3.30? If so, go to town in NTRA, because now it's time for us to head on into the strategy block.
It's time to dispense options, wit, wisdom, and education. It's time for the Strategy Block.
All right, everybody. You know what time it is. It is time for Uncle Mike to hold court for 27 minutes on the glory of the mid-carder that is Tito Santana. Have at it, sir.
Oh, boy. That's going to be a lot for 27 minutes. But with Tito Santana, you always know that if you don't get what you want, if you get him mad, he'll yell at you in Spanish like he used to do to Jesse the Body Ventura.
You know, sometimes he had tan shorts. Sometimes he had white shirts. Sometimes he had blue trunks. I mean, the guy was wild. Just a wild
Didn't he always have like that spaceship on the back of his shorts, too? That weird little design?
I don't even remember. I remember him just having like the most basic trunks imaginable. Maybe he did. Maybe later on he did. But not to my recollection, sir.
Hey, he does what he wants to do. He's Tito Santana, and we're not. So who am I to say anything? So what I do want to talk about is I want to expand a little bit on some things that I'm looking at in the bond world right now for strategies. In that if you are looking at a bond and you're concerned that the bond market's going to continue to fall on its face, but it's intriguing that it actually pays it pays anything right now, because for how long in our careers, at least, have we said, bonds are not worth it. They're just not paying anything. But now they do. So here's something to consider. And full disclosure, I am not in this trade, nor are any of my clients in this exact trade, but they are in some similar trades to this one. Today I'm looking at LQD. LQD is an ETF. It tracks investment grade bonds. And the ETF right now, it's priced at a little over $100 or $100.80 per share. And the dividend yield on annually, it's going to be just under 5%. These are corporate investment grade bonds. Now, if you were to just buy this outright, they're investment grade bonds. So they're theoretically, and I'm making air quotes as I'm saying this, safe. But the same people that are calling these bonds safe are the same people that said that the mortgage-backed securities were safe back in 2008. So take that safe with a grain of salt. Now, with that being said, let's say I want to buy a put on this, or let's say I want to just own this because, 5% yield, that's kind of nice. And the fact that the bonds have gotten beaten up like they have, well, makes me think that there might not be a lot more downside to them. Who knows? Maybe that's not how you feel. I don't know. But if this is how you're feeling, this is some things that I'm looking at. Step one, you buy the bond, you buy LQD, and let's go out a year. Let's go out to September of 2024, and let's sell a 101 covered call on it for $4.60. So right there, what you're doing is you own the bonds, and you're getting roughly $4.75 for yield on the year, assuming it continues to pay the yield, which it likely will. You never know. There's no rule that says they have to pay the yield or they'll go to jail. Well, I guess they might go to jail, or there's no guarantees, I guess is what I'm saying. But it is very likely that you will get that $4.75 between now and a year from now. Combine that with the covered call yield that you get of $4.60, and right there, you're getting roughly a 9% yield if you combine the covered call yield and the yield on the bond itself. And this is on investment grade paper, folks. This is not on junk bonds. This is not on JNK or some garbage bonds you see elsewhere. This is on investment grade paper. This is a way with which you can get over a 9% income on it. Now, let's say that that's a concern of yours, is that I'm concerned about bonds to the downside. Well, at the same time, what you can do is you can buy a 95 put. And right now, the 95 puts for September of 2024 are trading at, we'll just call it $2. So right there, here's the risk reward of the trade. Instead of then getting the 9% yield on it, you're getting roughly 7% yield on it if you combine the covered call, the protective put, and the bond yield itself. You're getting $7 for it, assuming it stays at the same level. Now, if it goes higher, you'll still get about that because we're selling an at-the-money covered call. But what if it goes lower? Uncle Mike, you're full of garbage. Bonds are going to go way lower. I do not feel comfortable buying these silly old bonds. You're crazy, my man. What can you do? Well, if they do pay the yield on them, which they likely will, if the covered call comes to fruition, which it likely will, meaning unless the exchanges blow up or something like that happens, you're going to get that covered call juice, and you're going to get your bond premium or your bond yield. You're really risking close to a break-even trade for the potential to make 7% on corporates. So if you want to be ultra-conservative in the bond world, that's a way with which to do it. And if you don't want to have the put in place, if you combine covered call yield along with the bond yield itself, you can almost come close to traditional rates of return on stocks with the risk of corporate bonds. Now, does that mean that corporate bonds are a safe investment? Good gosh, no. There's risk in anything. But have the understanding that you do have choices of what you can do in the fixed income market. And that's one of the choices that's kind of in my laboratory right now. I do have things similar to this going on, not this exact one. I just brought it up for a point of illustration. And so my compliance people don't get mad at me for telling exact positions. And that's the strategy block. First one for Q4.
The Uncle Mike Laboratory. I like that. It just conjures up images of you in the lab coat laughing maniacally. It's alive as lightning is crackling around your head. I kind of want to come visit the Uncle Mike Laboratory. It might be fun. Instead, listeners, we have to go around the block.
It's time to tell you what we'll be watching on our trading screens until the next episode. It's time for Around the Block.
All right, everybody, time to go around the block. Tell you what we're keeping an eye on for the rest of the week until the Thursday episode. Really quickly before we do that, let me pay off our question of the week from last week. Our new question of the week will be going live shortly out there, listeners. But we asked you, hey, we've seen a little red on the screen lately. Time to investigate your sentiment again. See what you folks are feeling about this market. Quite simply, where are you comfortable buying into or perhaps buying more if you're Uncle Mike? SPX right now gave you 4 choices, 4,300 to 43.5, which is about where it was when we posted it last week. A little lower, so below 4,200. Even lower, so below 4,000. And below the 2022 lows, so below 3,600. Those are your 4 choices. And with about 42% of the vote below 4,200, ended up taking the top spot. Right behind it, we had about 25% for below the 2022 low. So a full quarter of you are hanging out for 3,600 and below. Interesting. And then below 4,000, that's about 19% of you. And bringing up the rear right around here, the Uncle Mike camp, only 14% say you're comfortable buying in or buying more. Right around here, which is actually close to not quite 100 points higher. Let's see, as we're finishing up the show, it's about 30 to 80 points higher than where we are right now. So intriguing stuff. Mr. Meatball, sir, what are your thoughts on those poll results? B, what are you keeping an eye on? And C, I am going to need a winner, so tell me when to stop whenever the mood strikes you, sir.
You know, I completely forgot. Yeah, stop right now.
Okay. All right, I hit it there. Sorry for keeping you waiting, all show listeners, but Meatball, he loves himself a little bit of the old drama. Okay, let's see. Who is that person? It's Andrew Ashley. So congratulations, Andrew. Another Andrew out there. It's going to make the Rock Lobster even more angry that he's not winning a Pro Trading Crate. But Andrew Ashley, you are the winner of the September Pro Trading Crate. Congratulations to you. Our producers will reach out to you post-haste and get all those good goodies in the mail to you. All right, Mr. Meatball, sir, what do you keep an eye on for the rest of the week? And since we're coming up against it, where should folks go if they want more meatball goodness in their lives?
Yeah, go to optionpit.com. That's where you'll find me and all my stuff every single day. And on the week, we got non-farm payrolls coming up still. We have, Bitcoin might be breaking out. The dollar seems strong. Bonds seem to be falling apart. I think the big thing is you got to watch bonds. And for our question of the week, I continue with I would go lower. Maybe a little lower, right around I think people are going to start getting interested at 4,200. But I'll bet you the audience knowing our audience, they're looking a lot lower.
Well, certainly a quarter of them were listeners. In the meantime, listeners, you can check them out. You know where to go. You can go to Austin, knock on his front door, or just head on over to optionpit.com. Really easy to find his good goodies there. And Mr. Uncle Mike, sir, same questions for you. What are your thoughts on the results of our poll? B, what are you keeping an eye on for the rest of the week? And C, where can folks go if they want more Uncle Mike goodness?
Hey, buy right now. That's my thing. I mean, if it goes down a little bit further, it's worth the wait, in my opinion. Why miss this train? In terms of what I'm watching the bonds. Bonds are the thing. And the other thing to keep an eye on, we didn't talk about on the show, is that silver and gold are pulling back a little bit. So if you're buying the dip there, that's another area with which to look. And if you want to get more Uncle Mike in your heart, so to speak, check out my website, stcharleswealth.com, or follow me on Twitter at Mike TOSAW, TOSAW.
All right, check him out at Mike TOSAW on the old Twitter machine, or as the crazy folks call it, the X. That's going to do it for the old OB today. Unfortunately, it's going to do it for the network today. I got to head out, listeners. There's a big international derivatives conference in town. FIA back in town. So I got to head out and check out all the goings on over there. So no crypto rundown after this show today. We'll still have content for you, including a great pro Q&A for all you pro cats coming up tomorrow, getting into some of the trading psychology. So if you have questions along those lines, get them in over there on the members hotline. It's always a fascinating topic, always one worthy of a lot of discussion. Last time we had this person on, there was a lot of interest in it. So get those questions in now. If you're not part of the pro, and maybe you also want to join, who was that? It was Andrew Ashley who won the Pro Trading Crate for September. Only one place to go, theoptionsinsider.com/pro. Back again on Wednesday for the old Options Boot Camp. I know a lot of you loving that fun, including listeners from Frankfurt. That was always fun to see the international contingent weighing in, showing Dan around Munich in the beer hall. So always fun. Always love the international contingent. And then, of course, back again on Thursday with the Flowmaster for another episode of the Option Block. Stay safe out there, everybody.
You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions@theoptionsinsider.com.